Say hello to Icejade. Now I'm sure Icejade is a somewhat familiar deck for you, as it's existed for quite a while. But it's kind of had the reputation as the bad Abyss lore deck. It's never really had any relevant meta success. However, the new support in Cyberstorm Access has a good chance of changing that, as it gives the deck a lot more firepower and more protection, two things the deck desperately needed. So what does the new card actually do? Well, it is named Icejade Ran. It is a level 7 water aqua tuner with 1500 attack and 2500 defense. And its first effect is a hard once per turn. And that effect is that you can discard one other Icejade card or water monster to special summon itself from your hand, then summon a level 3 token. But while that token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except water monsters. Which is kind of annoying because there are some good level 10s you want to summon outside of water, but there are ways around it. Then the second effect is that this card's name becomes Icejade Cenote and in Cradle while it is equipped with an equip card. A neat effect to sort of copy the field spell in case for whatever reason you don't have it. Speaking of level 10 synchros, one of their not brand new but definitely recent level 10 synchros is Icejade Ran, a level 10 water synchro of 3000 attack and 1500 defense, and it must be made with a water tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. Now its effect is unique but very strong. You can quick effect make face-up monsters you control unable to be destroyed or banished by your opponent's card effects for the rest of this turn. Then, if this effect was activated in response to the activation of opponent's card effect, you can banish all cards with that name on your opponent's field and in their graveyard. And if a card is banished by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, except during a damage step, you can special summon this card. And you can do that every single turn. So Gamir is basically a constantly recurring, very strong level 10 synchro that gives your monsters all protection. Very much worth going into. The other recent Icejade card that's OCG only is Great Icejade Manifestation. And its effect is that if your opponent has a monster on their field and or in their graveyard and you control a water monster, you can take one Icejade monster from your deck and either send it to the grave or special summon it. Then, if a face-up Icejade monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card except by being destroyed, and except during a damage step, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one card your opponent controls and banish it. This is a very strong card as it lets you play through interruptions going second and hand traps, basically big Icejades out from your deck for free or dumping them in the grave, and its second effect is nice for kind of punishing your opponent for trying to play around the destruction floating effects of the main Icejades. And well, of course, deck has a pretty extensive backup lineup of existing cards that are all varying levels of power, but there's some very strong ones in there. Now as for these sort of standard Icejades, I'm only really running two, and that is Acti and Tremora. And these are the ones, by standard I mean they have the floating effect of, when they're in the grave, if an Icejade you control is destroyed by battle or card effect or ever water monster, you can banish this card and special summon a Icejade from your hand or graveyard. Now, the reason why I'm running only a couple is I don't really feel like they're that strong in this kind of version of the deck that wants to turbo out the skill drain, but their little grave effects are very nice, and say Tremora is very good for getting some sort of Icejades that are stuck in your hand, for example on Aegirine Ran, and summoning them on the field if you want to make some sort of Xyz monster. Now Acti lets you kind of cycle stuff in the grave and draw cards, and attain with the field spell you can get a nice little +1 going, so they're solid one-ofs. They're very easy to search. Now why are they easy to search? That's because of Icejade Cradle, the deck's search spell, which is one of the strongest search spells in the entire game, mainly because it's not hard once per turn. The restriction is instead that you can only search an Icejade with a different name from the cards you control or in your graveyard. But that means if you say open a 3 Cradle, you can just search 3 different Icejades before doing anything. And given the ease of sort of getting an Icejade back into the hand or banishing it, you can even search Icejades you've already gone through over the course of the duel. Now how do you get the Cradle? Well, you can use Aegirine, pretty much the strongest Icejade as, well, on normal special summon, it just searches an Icejade spell trap, which can be any of them, including Cradle. Its outward effect is that when your opponent activates card effect targets it or attacks it, you can make it immune to that destruction and then reborn an Icejade, which is another solid effect. As for the other Icejades, the notable other kind are the 2 creations, as these sort of pseudo-equip spells. Kingfisher's ability is that it sort of turns your Icejades into super heavy samurais and lets you bounce opponent's monsters to hand to summon itself, Then Aegir's effect is that it can quick effect equip itself and then summon itself. So it's a pretty good card and also boosts the attack and defense for each banished monster. Both of these very good in the grind game, sort of summoning themselves, getting rid of cards, buffing cards. You can even use Aegirine Cassis for level 10 synchros because it's a tuner. Now notably about Aegiro is that you can only use one of its effects per turn, but say you really need to summon it, you can just use a male Tremora to summon it. And then the sort of main deck boss monster of Icejades is Cosmochlor, the level 10. And if a face-up card is in the field zone, you can special summon this card from your hand, and while the field spell's on your field, monsters your opponent controls can only activate their effects the turn they are summoned, which is a very strong effect for going second, but is even better in tandem with Icejade Curse, which, while you control an Icejade monster and the field spell, your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters that were summoned that turn. And so basically these combined is just a one-sided skill drain. And Curse is strong even without Cosmochlor, as it's basically just a skill drain on your opponent's turn, which is kind of the most important one. The only decks that can really play through Curse effortlessly is something like Tyr that can just play when you're going first. They also both have secondary effects that are neat, like doing burn damage and reducing attack. The remaining lineup of Icejade spell traps is pretty decent, and that's in the form of the field spell and their trap. Now the field spell, when it's activated, lets you add an Icejade that is banished or in the grave to hand. Very nice recycling effect, especially for how easy it is to get to the field spell. You can keep activating it over and over again over the course of a duel to keep recycling cards. Then when a monster is summoned, through a kind of complex process, you can debuff your opponent's entire field in terms of attack. Then the trap card, Icejade Erosion, which is basically a continuous trap on negate that you can use every single turn that does have the cost of destroying an Icejade you control. But with cards like Acti and Tremora, you can even get advantage off of that. Then it similarly shares the same sort of effect as Manifestation, where if a face-up water monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card except by being destroyed, you can add to your hand or special summon an Icejade from your deck, which means if your opponent, say, tries to banish a card you control, you can get advantage off it. Now as far as the generic cards I'm running, well, I'm running 3 Pot of Prosperity. As well, there's plenty of sort of spare space in the extra deck that you can sort of banish face down to excavate 6. And because you want to sort of assemble ideally a 3-card combo, being able to search pretty much any card in your deck with this is pretty nice, especially because cards like Aegirine and Cradle can turn this into a search of anything. Then I'm running a Metaverse and a Terraforming, as you really want to get access to the field spell as it turns on almost all of your really powerful cards, but also you want to kind of keep activating every turn to recycle cards, so being able to have multiple copies of it is very nice. Called by just to stop hand traps, and Impermanence, a sort of standard, good, flexible staple card. As for the extra deck, as I previously stated, we're running Gamir, in this case 2, just because it's the main Icejade Synchro, it's nice to have a couple of copies, gives very good protection. They're running Chang'Ying, a very strong level 10 Synchro, and it's water, so it's not hard at all to summon. We're also running Barone. Now while you can't just instantly summon Barone off of something like Rand's effect, you can summon off something like Creation Aegiro, or if you go through a word process where you can actually link off the Icejade token for area or an enemy, you can then use Ran and Aegirine to make Barone, because notably, Ran restricts the token from being used for anything but waters, but not to just Synchros, and it doesn't lock you for the rest of the turn. It's the sort of sword restriction where it's only while it's on the field. Then I'm running a plethora of Xyz monsters, in this case POST-CYAC and Slicer, because they're levels of the creations, it's not too hard to get 2 of these on the field, and they're nice for niche cases. There's plenty of room in the extra deck. Then running 2 Gustav Max, because Cosmochlor and the plethora of level 10 Synchros. Gustav Max is amazing for closing out games. You know, let's say you go to battle, make a big swing, you can make Gustav Max to just burn to death. And of course, I'm running Zeus, because of all these Xyz monsters. Then I'm running these sort of Nightmares and Access Code that are just solid standard links, as the only card that really locks you into waters or anything is Ran, so it's very easy to summon generic links. And then Area and Anemone are the water links of choice. Coral Anemone is great, as it lets you reborn stuff like Aegirine or Acti, which are very good advantage cards. And the Area is just an overall solidly strong card, lets you float. You can even steal, say, like certain tier limit monsters from your opponent's grave, or at least threaten to steal them. And they're just solid. They're good ways to get the Ran token off field if you want to do something weird with it, and there's plenty of room for them. How about a look at what Icejades can do? This is a pretty good starting hand, consisting of Icejade Cosmiclore, Icejade Erosion, Aegirine, Terraforming, and Curse. To start off, we go ahead and activate Terraforming to just search the field spell. Afterwards, we go ahead and normal summon Aegirine to search from our deck to our hand the search spell Cradle. Then we'll use Cradle to search Ran. Afterwards, we go ahead and use Ran, discard Cosmiclore, and then summon the token. We then synchro summon into Gamir. Then use the field spell to recycle from our grave to our hand Cosmiclore, summon Cosmiclore, activate Curse, and set Erosion. So what does this end board do? Well, we have the sort of one-sided skill drain setup. Curse, negating the effects of monsters that are summoned that turn, and Cosmiclore, negating the effects of monsters after the turn they are summoned. As for the other cards, we have Erosion, which is non-negate, very strong, and Gamir gives a nice blanket protection from destruction and banishing. This board also has a decent follow-up, nothing really immediate, but there's plenty of draws off the top that are pretty good, and if we get, say, away to an Evercopy Cradle, we can do quite a lot. Or like if Aegirine gets targeted, we can summon Ran and do things with that, so it's not too bad. And it's not too hard to make this board. While it was a pretty specific setup of cards, you have so many searchers, so it's not too hard to get to it. So in conclusion, Icejade is a deck that has a lot of potential, and its new support definitely helps it, but honestly I don't think it'll even crack into the meta. One-sided skill drain is impressive, but when decks like Tearlaments can just play out of the graveyard, it's not that remarkable. It's definitely more playable, you know, you can bring it to locals and not get laughed out of it, and it can actually access level 10 synchros a lot better now. So it's worth taking a look at, and there might be some sort of generic water good stuff variant of the deck that does see success. And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and feel free to leave any feedback you have in the comments, and subscribe if you want to see more in the future.